when you get right down to it, what are the mainstream challenges now? It seems that a lot of them are things that we just take for granted. Like take the intersection, the next one when you're driving, where there's a stop sign or a stoplight and you stop. And there are no other cars. Why do you stop? Well, it's the law. It's the way things work. When you look now at the self-driving car, I think a lot of people, they don't think much about the self-driving car. It doesn't mean much to them. It's not a part of their life. But what happens with those cars at intersections is most times they don't stop. They don't have to stop. They know where all the other cars are. There's a kind of flow, and you realize once we're in the era of the self-driving car, this time we accept of just waiting at a stoplight when there's no other cars around, because that's the law. We won't be doing that. What about you're talking about being in contact with the world? Many of us are kind of feeling like that, but it's a kind of redundant contact because things aren't quite worked out. If you have multiple devices, you have desktop machines and laptops and then handheld phones that are smart that do all the same things. If somebody sends you a message on Skype, a text message, it will pick one of those many devices, and it'll be right on top and obvious of that particular device, that particular message, but it won't be on the other ones. And so it's assuming that one device is the only one that you have, but you may have many. You may spend days without going back to that one where this message is right on top. And so there are a lot of assumptions here that haven't been worked out. How many devices does a person have? When you send a message to the front, when you have it make a sound, are they going to be there? Is that device with them? There are a whole bunch of things. And the thing that brought this to home this week is in my job of signing out kidney biopsies. It's important to dictate the report and to get it on the system. So I did all that and in a timely manner. And so on Tuesday morning, I had this case done. It was on the system, everything was right. But on my desk is a phone with a red light that goes on when there's a voicemail there. And the one thing, I was checking my mail, I was everything, but I didn't look at the phone. So somebody sent me a message asking about that case, and they didn't look on the system to see that it was already signed out. So 2 days go by where this person is frustrated that I haven't answered the question that I answered in text Tuesday morning, but on Thursday they're frustrated that I haven't answered their voicemail. Well, it's because there are so marvelous many ways to communicate. How hard would it be to bring them all together? Well, I don't know how to do that, but that's obviously the future. So the future is never waiting at a traffic intersection when there's nothing coming, there's not another car in for miles. You won't have to do that anymore. And if somebody's sending you a message, it won't matter exactly how they send it. You will receive it. It seems simple,
Well, I mean, you're touching on something in a physiological sense is attention mechanisms. I mean,
yes.
in the human body, if you are not being exposed to change, that sensory mechanism will atrophy.
Yes.
If you put a young child into a closet, they will not develop, and all of the sensory mechanisms, et cetera, atrophy. When you are exposed to a lot of stimulation, your brain today sorts out what's signal and what isn't. So
yes.
there's noise in this room that you may not be paying attention to, but it's entering into the brain, and something in that brain is sorting out what you're actually going to perceive and not perceive. And that was my PhD, was the neurophysiology of attention, is how does the brain actually do that? What we're doing today with algorithms is looking at the history of what this individual has as a value and determining what they likely want to perceive and what they want to see. So when you've got these multiple mechanisms coming at you, you can say choked with data and starved for information. I don't think that's necessarily the future. I think that there are those today that are building algorithms to elevate to the level of signal what they believe you will say is important. The difficulty with that is creativity begins to die away, because often creativity is when dissonance occurs. When it doesn't come to you because you expect it, and you don't necessarily let it in. It might have happened in a dream, it might have happened because of a mistake, but that serendipity of the error, that all of a sudden you see a relationship that was not common, that's what the scientist looks for, is not that everything's the same, but they look for what's different to try and understand the anomaly.
Right.
So that's an exciting moment. And there are many people that don't like that. There are people that want to get on an assembly line in life, that everything is the same.
Yes.
They want a degree, that everything is the same, I don't get challenged.
Right.
Well, to me, they are in more doo-doo than the people that I worked with in the field of mental retardation, because they've proclaimed death.
Yes.
They don't want to learn anymore. They don't want dissonance in their lives. That's where the excitement is.
Yeah.
To me, and in my life, the excitement was the dissonance of taking big jumps in my life that I got scared. And because I think this is what a professional learner is. A professional learner will go into the cave that others are afraid to go into, because it's in there that they will discover something that hasn't been seen before.
No, I think the important dissonance now is a very simple one. On the one hand, it's screen space. And on the other hand, it's the single convergent device. Now we have a situation where you can get everything on one device. Well, what size should it be? Well, you're capable of looking at a huge screen. It's not convenient to take a huge screen around with you. So how are we, and that's where all these frustrating things where something comes on top of one of your devices and you're somewhere else, or you're not paying, that's what it's about. This dissonance, this conflict between screen space on the one hand, in many corporate offices today, they have 3 large monitors, and you can look at an enormous amount of stuff in that, but it's kind of like nailing your shoes to the floor. What happens when you leave the room? You don't have access to any of that stuff. Now, the stuff that's on those 3 large monitors, can you somehow have it in an effective way on mobile devices? Well, I think in the future you will be able to. The days of the office with these 3 huge screens will be gone. You'll have that everywhere that you go.
Well, I'll push it even further, because I don't think I'm going to dismiss that as our issue. That'll be the algorithms issue. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that we as human beings can compete in the processing of information as Watson did on the Jeopardy show. So if that's the case, and we want to enter into that environment, because we'll either bail out, and when we have a problem, some technology will come along to solve it. Mm-hmm. But at some point in time, the offloading of intelligence and machines deciding becomes the real issue.
Yeah.
Are we all going to become artists? Are we going to play in that other part of the hemisphere, which is where music is and where art is and where there's a whole set of new relationships? Will we enter into a period of time where the human being is no longer challenged by problems of muscle, problems of memory, problems of learning? What he's confronted with is problems of boredom. And I'll take you through a little exercise. And I've asked this question of 10,000 people, so I got a pretty idea of what's coming back to me. How many of you are aware of what stem cells have been proclaimed to possibly do, and that is life extension? Right, so we've heard of that, and it's not hard to imagine. So I asked 10,000 people in many different settings, how many of you would opt for everlasting life? Oh boy, you have just screwed up my research.
Well,
I'm going to take you through the exercise, because I think it illuminates something about who we are as human beings. Most people don't answer yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm stunned when that happens, and I go through a little bit of drama in front of the audience about, I just offered you something that's the most precious gift that anybody's has, which is life. And only 8 of you have ever raised your hand. So I'm confused. Now, maybe you think you're going to look 300 years old.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the issue. So let's imagine that that's not the case, that in fact stem cells or Ponce's promise of everlasting life is not lasting until you're a prune, but you are vibrant and fresh and life has value. But let me ask you another question, because none of you answered yes or very few to the first question. How many of you would opt for another day? Everybody raises their hand. Now I got them in a trap. One moment I gave you an infinite amount of something and you turned it down, and now I give you one thing of that something and you want it. Now I'm really confused, because you clearly value it in the supply of one, but not in the value of infinity. So I scratched my head and I asked him another question. If I gave you the option of a certain number of years, how many years would you take? And the general answer is about 100. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because it coincides probably with what today's biological limits are.
Yes.
But what is it about 101 years that is different than 100? And I have to conclude that it's experience and boredom. And that what they're telling me is that life, as they have defined it, is about experiences. And whether those experiences remain interesting, whether those experiences remain different, because they don't want to be repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And I thought that therein lies an understanding of what man is man is experiences. And if those experiences are varied, then life has value. But when life does not have a variability to it, it has no value.
Yes.
Which says that the individual who thirsts to have a standard, common, homeostatic life is proclaiming an early death.
Yeah. So if you consider the possibility of a post-scarcity world where robots do virtually everything that human beings do now.
Sure.
Can we offload all that? Well, on the one hand, why not? A lot of people spend most of the day complaining about their jobs. It's a very common thing to have most of your conversations about that. So why not take everything that you do today and have a machine that can do that? Why not?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
what's left? What else will we do? What will our purpose be?
Yeah.
Many people, if you say, "Well, who are you?" they start telling you their job. That they identify that's the reason that they exist, because they have this job. This is what they do. What if practically everything that human beings do today, robots do tomorrow? Then when somebody asks us who we are, how will we describe ourselves? Well, I have an aspiration to have, a certain kind of experience? What?
Well, I mean, Maslow opens up that dialogue. If the individual has no material means, then that becomes their driver. If they don't have friends, they become socially driven. At some point in time, they try to realize and become self-actualized to determine what their limits are.
Yes.
That's the domain of today. I won't even, in this context, without a martini in hand, enter into a dialogue about what I think comes next. Fortunately, well, maybe not so fortunately, if stem cells arrive, I'll be able to witness it and I'll watch it. But I won't even pretend, because the institutional structure that we've been living in and the habits and the values will be so different that I think it's almost impossible to discuss and to truly understand what, quote, the relevance of mankind may be. It may be that mankind becomes irrelevant. It may be that this is simply a passing on. That's one scenario. There's another one where we all become freaking geniuses, not because our brains are so bright, but because the algorithms are doing so many amazing things that I don't want to go there. I think that's time to hope that the classes come to an end and we leave everybody begging to come back next year so we get a little bit closer. But it's only with a martini that I enter into the next realm. My wife would shoot me to be otherwise.
It's fascinating to think that, at the moment, it seems like Einstein was seriously wrong about only one thing, and it's so boring, really, what he was wrong about. That is the assumption that every human being wishes to be inspired by the stars in the sky and so on. A number of things that he said suggest that. And yet you can imagine felons robbing houses in, you know, dark places in cities and so on, who actually never look at the night sky. I would think that's totally lame. I mean, why are you looking at the stars? So it would be nice if he were right, and maybe human beings will change so we're all capable of being, you know, inspired by beauty and all this sort of thing.
Well, I look into physics every now and then. I'm always, when I alluded to the early stages of one's life when you lie in the meadows and you look at infinity, is to try and understand whether or not the relationship of man to the environment will in any way define where we might end up, whether there is such a thing as string theory, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that does appear to be apparent at the moments of creation, whether or not you're creationist or you look at the emergence of the universe, is uncertainty.
Yes.
The variable of uncertainty is the determinant, not all the rest. And I think that will prevail. And in light of that, we will remain thirsting to know. And that is where we left the Garden of Eden and created our original sin, where we lost faith and said, I want to know. And we've all entered into that, and that's our sin, as our thirst. And there's always that element of uncertainty to keep us going.
Right.
We've entered into a lot of philosophy there, but by and large, science is based on philosophy and to try and resolve uncertainty. And that's how most of us spend our lives, some of us more intensely and others incidentally. But it's an incredible journey, and hopefully it lasts for a long while.